guys, it's Pip from Solar Flow, and my mom is going to be exploring the club. She'll be sharing how it first came to be and by who, and how it may or may not be connected to the Cabal and Freemasons. This and so much more.
Good job. So, as Pip just introduced today's topic, we are exploring all things the club. The long anticipated and long awaited video. Now we have 52 pages of notes to get through, so you're going to want to make yourself comfortable. Now, here's the thing, because it's so long and extensive, there are also timestamps down below. However, I am not providing the timestamps because I am encouraging you to hop around. No. The way this video is formatted is kind of like a story. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And if you are hopping around, it's not going to make the same amount of sense as if you are watching it all the way through, because also the material is building on material that I have shared earlier on. So as we get more detailed and more in depth and more into it, it's building off of what came at the beginning of the video. So please, I'm gonna ask you guys to do me a solid. Do not jump around. Please watch it all the way through, even if it is not in one sitting. Now, there's also going to be some percentage of the material that I have shared in other content of mine. And that is because, first and foremost, some of the new information that came in pertains to previous information that I have shared. But also, this video is kind of going to be like a one-stop shop, where if I get asked a question or if you guys want to learn more information about how the club operates, I won't necessarily be reminding you guys to like go back to the video that I had done on the, the movie industry, or go back to the video that I had done on the music industry. It's where this is bringing all of it together. So this is the most comprehensive overview and information share on all things that are club related. Now, to that end, I'm also going to be providing links to my previous material that I am going to be mentioning here down below in the description box. I'm not going to necessarily call out every single time there is something that is shared down below, because we will be here for fucking ever and a day if I was calling out every single thing. So once you are getting yourself situated and you're going to be checking out the timestamps, below the timestamps are going to be other content of mine that pertains to this one that I may or may not be saying it's linked down below, but you're going to want to check out the links that are down below for something else that was discussed in another video that can pertain, but is not necessarily a direct correlation. So I'm providing it for you guys so you can kind of do some further deep dive analysis if you feel called to. So with that in mind, let's dive in. So what is the club and when did it originate? So here we go. The club, as I refer to it, is kind of like an exclusive country club. And what do country clubs have? They have memberships, annual dues, access to the grounds and different kinds of rooms, but the country club also has so much more. Just like the club is so much more than just this analogy to it being a country club, because it is in fact a series of interconnected networks that have infiltrated or set up every industry in the world, such as media, fashion, agriculture, entertainment, politics, the medical system, and there is not one industry that has not been infiltrated or directly been set up by the club. And this includes new ones such as social media, spirituality, and self-help books, or anything one would expect to be high vibe. So you may be wondering, if they have infiltrated or set up all industries globally, when exactly did the club first begin? And it all started with John D. Rockefeller. Now, he is somebody that I have been asked to look into on a great number of occasions. So if you were ever curious and you wanted a behind the veil energy read into John D. Rockefeller, you're getting it here. It was actually shown to me that the club started with John D. Rockefeller. Now, who was John D. Rockefeller? He was an American business magnate and one of the wealthiest people of all time. And in fact, he was one of the richest people in all of modern history. He founded the Standard Oil Company, which is the petroleum industry. And this was a corporate trust that included 41 investors. In 1882, it was valued at $70 million, which by today's standards, taking into account inflation, would be the equivalent of, let me see if I can get the number right, $1,707,317,000.17. I'm sorry, the number just staggers me. He ran the Standard Oil Company until 1897. But even after he had stepped down, he remained its largest shareholder, and thus he retained an enormous amount of control over it. Now, in case you're wondering, Faye, did you channel this? No. So anytime I'm going to be mentioning like numbers, obviously, I mean, maybe it's not obvious for you. I didn't actually channel the numbers. That actually came via Google. And also, any of the 3D information that I'm going to be sharing, like the fact that he had founded the Standard Oil Company, this also is not channeled information. This I acquired off of our good friend Google. And I'm taking the time to specifically point this out to you guys because I always want to be completely transparent what is channeled and what is 3D material information that I acquired using the internet. So the fact that he founded the Standard Oil Company, all of the numbers that I'm going to be sharing, the dates, things like that, that's Google. Everything else is channeled information. Okay, so he had run the Standard Oil Company until 1897, but even after he had stepped down, he remained its largest shareholder, and thus he had retained an enormous amount of control. After stepping down, he turned his attention to the education system, medicine, and higher education, and he had founded and funded, again, this is from Google, the University of Chicago, Rockefeller University, Central Philadelphia University, the General Education Board, and the Rockefeller Foundation. In 1903, he had provided financial support to these exclusive universities. Keep this in mind: Yale, Harvard, Columbia, Brown, Wellesley, and Vassar. In 1901, he founded the Rockefeller Medical Institute for Medical Research, and to date, the Rockefeller Medical Institute claims that it has connections to 23 Nobel laureates, as in people that have won a Nobel Prize for having made the greatest contribution to mankind. Keep this in mind, please. He essentially modernized medicine, but remember, because he was first and foremost connected to the petroleum industry. That is what modern medicine is made of. It's petroleum-based money, and it is petroleum-based ingredients as well. Now, because the Rockefeller Medical Institute was the first of its kind, they could, and they did, make up the curriculum to be whatever they wanted it to be. Now, despite John D. Rockefeller's monumental wealth, it continued to expand as kerosene oil grew in importance, and he became the richest person in the country, controlling 90% of all oil in the United States. In 1911, the Supreme Court ruled that the Standard Oil Company had to be dismantled for violating federal antitrust laws. As in, essentially, because of the Standard Oil Company, there was no competition in the oil industry as it was a monopoly. Therefore, it broke up into 34 separate entities. But here's a rhetorical question for you guys. Does anyone actually believe that after having that much power, money, control, and influence, they all went 34 separate and distinct ways? No. Because while it was in fact separate on paper to give the appearance of being separate and distinct, and also to give the appearance of choice to the consumer, it was still run by friends. This group of people that had all been part of the investors, the 41 investors that made up the Standard Oil Company, they were broken up by the Supreme Court. But they were only broken up on paper because they still stayed connected and they were still looking out for one another. So it was still run by his friends, his network, and his people that continued to stay on and to run these companies. Even though it was still in fact a monopoly, but it was veiled in choice, such as, do I want to get gas from Exxon, or do I want to get gas from Mobil, or do I want to get gas from Chevron? But really, again, they were only separate and distinct on paper. So the top 1% has always been in charge of various industries since the early 1900s. But this is in the United States alone. Because I remind you that the Cabal did not originate in the United States. So the top percentage has been in charge worldwide for far longer, but this was in the United States alone. Now, since we did not know that they were all interconnected and related, we never knew that we never really had a choice, because no matter who we gave our money to, it was all supporting an interconnected network of people who were thick as thieves. And who were they? They were the original investors of the Standard Oil Company that was connected to John D. Rockefeller. John D. Rockefeller became the first billionaire with his net worth being nearly 2% of the entire United States economy. And in 1913, he had an estimated net worth of $900 million, which by today's standard is $17,647,058,000. And this is where I get confused because there's still more numbers and I don't know how to keep going with them. So it was basically $17 billion, $17,647,000,000 and change. Because let's be honest, once you've got that amount of money, like, are we really splitting hairs? Like, does it make a difference if it's like 53 cents or 54 cents? It's $17 billion. And this was, again, in 1913. Now, interestingly enough, he did devote himself to philanthropic endeavors, which, to be honest, was him, in reality, funding his friends' new endeavors so they could continue to make money as they branched out with new projects under the guise of so-called social evolution. So the fix of organizations, or specifically charity organizations, raising money, but it's really in fact them lining their own pockets, is coded into the energetic DNA of organizations such as the Red Cross and even more recently BLM. Because if you know, you know. If you've had your eyes open for a while, you know the person who founded BLM bought herself like 3 different houses in one of the most exclusive like zip codes in the United States. It's not coincidental. It's because it was in fact coded into the very foundation of all charity organizations to begin with. When there is so much damn money coming in, there's a lot of money that's going to slip through the cracks, that's going to make its way up to the top. Or one could actually really say it comes into the top and then it kind of trickles down to the bottom. So the amount of money that gets sent to the organizations or the charities that they claim to be running, raising money for, the person at the very, very top is just distributing the bare essentials for what they need to in fact get things done. Now, according to John D. Rockefeller, religion was a guiding force in his life, and he claimed that it was the source of all of his success. And he was devout. But in case you're wondering, why was he so devout? It's in fact because John D. Rockefeller was trying to gain favor with God. Because he had fallen out of favor as he was a fallen angel demon hybrid. So imagine if an angel fornicated with a demon, and then how they would be tainted by the sexual interaction. How energetically they would be changed by the sexual exchange, and how that would then impact their choices and lower their vibration. Because not all angels follow the will of God. Because just like we have free will, so do they. And exercising their free will could look like fornicating with a demon, or even stealing sacred things from the divine realm, as I had discussed in my video on ancient Egypt, or the Nephilim that had fornicated with human women. So John D. Rockefeller's soul was one such angel that did exercise his free will by fornicating with a demon, and was then relegated to the status of a fallen angel, which had lowered his vibration and made him a match for the earthly domain. Because there be no angels here. The energy here on the earth plane is far too low energetically to be a match with angels. So the only way that we can in fact have an angel on the earthly domain is if they are a fallen angel and their vibration has already been lowered, as was the case with the soul of John D. Rockefeller. So he was born into the body of someone named John Rockefeller, who was devout in his effort to earn favor with God by immersing himself in religion. Now, I'm also going to remind you, this is not like on a conscious level. John D. Rockefeller did not consciously know that he was a fallen angel demon hybrid. He was not consciously devout in his pursuit of connecting to God because he knew that that's what he was doing. No. This was on a soul level. This is not a conscious thought that he had had. This was soul consciousness, not John D. Rockefeller mental consciousness. He didn't know that's what he was mentally trying to do. However, on a soul level, he had been so corrupted by the sexual exchange with the demon and the choices that he had made in his life, anger practically vibrated off of him because that's what was in his heart. Because once I had connected to his energy, literally it felt like there was just like these angry waves of emotion that were emanating from him. He was shown to me as being like an apple with a rotten core. But it was not necessarily something that could be seen just by looking at him. If you don't cut up an apple or take a bite into it, do you know if the core is rotten? No, it was the same thing here. Because on the outside, he appeared pious and religious, and he was known to give dimes to little kids. But he was also giving money to adults and even other wealthy adults. And while giving the neighborhood kids coins, reinforced the exterior of what he in fact wanted people to see about him. So his motivation in giving money to adults was in fact far darker, because he wanted people to remember and to not forget who owned them. And as it happened, as a side effect, it also created a sense of idol worship in the neighborhood towards him. Like, look how great and magnanimous John D. Rockefeller was, because he even gave money to people he had just met when he was out and about walking around. So, like, look, God, again on a soul level, he might have been thinking, not consciously, I may not be in favor with you, but I have my own godlike status. But distributing money is also a way to distribute one's energy and intention, both on an individual level, and thus it is the equivalent of a micro corruption, but also on an organizational level, such as giving money to the FDA, or founding medical schools, or setting up the General Education Board. See where we're going with this? And despite his financial largesse, many remembered him as being ruthless, unscrupulous, and a bully. And even, in fact, greedy. So imagine he was worth billions of dollars and he was greedy. Many even reported that he dominated people to get his way. Now, I'm also going to remind you this, what I'm just shared here and what I'm going to continue to share, this is acquired off of Google, okay? At the time of his passing away in 1937, at 97 years old, he was worth an estimated $1.4 billion. Now, I had erroneously, when I first recorded this, said that it was worth $30 billion by 2025 standards. And then I had looked at the number and I realized it was way too big to be billion. So I sat down to re-record this segment because at the time of his crossing over, by 2025 standards, he had an estimated net worth of 30 trillion, 689,555,555.56. And if you yourself are a visual person and you would like to see what the number looks like, that's what it looks like. And he had all that money, but he was still known to be greedy and unscrupulous in his pursuit of money, because he, just as all those that have stepped away or lost their connection to God, have a hole inside of them that cannot be filled by anything other than the spark of the divine. But they will continue to try to fill that hole with money or 3D materialism, and it was no different for him and all of his friends. And just as he would do just about anything to get more of it, as in more money, which is why he was known to be greedy and unscrupulous, so would his friends, the ones that had set up charitable organizations or branched off to create their own oil companies in different names, or the ones that had branched off and gone into banking and finance, or the ones that he had hired for his medical school, or the ones that had gone off and opened up movie studios. So you kind of see how it's coded into the DNA of all of these different organizations. Because the vibration of the foundation of these various different people and the energetic DNA of their founding it was heavy, dense, and completely devoid of God. So John D. Rockefeller and his friends were stuck, if you will, in their first chakras. And I'm going to just briefly touch on this. So chakras are like meridian points in the body, and each meridian point can be located in a different location in the body. They start at the base of the spine, and then it travels up the spine to the crown of the head. And there's 7 and distinct different chakras, and they all correspond to a different energy that you can see manifested either in a person or out in the world. So they were stuck in their first chakra. And what is the first chakra? It basically rules over anything and everything that is connected to survival. What do we need to survive? Money. So they were all stuck in their first chakra, which is, again, money. It's survival. You need money to survive. But what also assures survival of the race as a whole? It's fornicating, it's procreation. You need food to survive, you need water to survive. So it's anything that is of a 3D material nature. So they were stuck in their first chakra, and they were wealthy, and they were bored. They were low vibe, and thus their sphere of influence and what they would develop out in the world would be low vibe too. Just as by John Rockefeller founding medical schools, it was his low vibe energy that was infused into the curriculum, and every student that passed through it was tainted by his low vibration. And since he was the so-called father of modern medicine, it was his dark energy that influenced the modern medicine that he pioneered. Because how else can one explain how herbs and healing, which had been dominant for thousands of years prior to John D. Rockefeller and the foundation of modern medicine, so it had been dominant for thousands of years prior, had suddenly, and it's funny, it's not funny, I wrote demonized, but it's like, yeah, it in fact was demonized because he was a demon fallen angel hybrid. So it literally, herbs and natural remedy healings had been demonized by his demonic energy and was now akin to snake oil. The herbs were now akin to snake oil. Because dark demonic energy destroys, it does not create, which also directly correlates to the thousands of new diseases we now have today, and how they were created with low vibe intentions and low vibe energies. with the intention of the friends of John D. Rockefeller benefiting of them and with his friends in the creation and foundation of pharmaceuticals, what we would today consider to be big pharma. It wasn't big pharma back then. It was the foundation of pharmaceuticals. So his friends, John D. Rockefeller's friends, created the diseases. So his other friends in the pharmaceutical industry could benefit from the diseases the friends had made. Because remember, these were all the same friends that had controlled the oil companies until the Supreme Court had forced them to disband. But remember, it was on paper only, because they had remained loyal and committed to one another and whatever endeavors they would next go into. So really, the Supreme Court had unknowingly set into motion the founding of the club, as it drove these people apart and just moved them to other groups and other organizations, other businesses and other industries, but they were still always connected, and they still existed solely with the intention of remaining exclusive and wealthy and loyal to one another. And with the top 1% looking out for the other top 1%, because that's how it had always been when they were all part of the Standard Oil Company. Now they had just diversified, but they were still loyal to one another and connected to one another. And as we know, those with power and money and influence like to keep it in the family. And they like to look out for their own, so it perpetuated with nepotism. But this was not just, I'm getting old and I run Exxon, so I'm gonna step down and leave it to my son. No, this was also cross-organizational nepotism. So let's say, for example, Bob from Exxon had a son who was interested in going to medical school. A spot would be saved for him at one of Rockefeller's medical schools. They hold spots for the other elite kids. See how they keep it in the family? I'm going to give you another example. These are all fictitious people that I just made up. If Dave from the banking industry had a kid who liked acting and was actually, in fact, good at it, she would be cast into a movie at a studio his buddy Tom owned. They kept it in the family. Because back then, the heads of all of these industries were already connected. Were already the disbanded elites, and their kids never had to pay their dues or climb the ladder of success, because a place would always be held for them, whether it was at an elite university or a job. They would always be looked out for by their own. So as the expression goes, it's one big club and we ain't in it, is true. These people felt untouchable. They were wealthy, connected, and they owned pretty much everything, and they were already low vibe, and their success only amplified their low vibration. Because when you have a group of wealthy men that own just about everything, but they have no consciousness or concern for anybody else but them and only their kind, who exist above reproach, boredom ensues. And with boredom, in the absence of reproach or accountability, deviance grows as well. Because they can do just about anything they wish to do, and they could get away with it. So the bar of what they could do expands, because their tolerance for deviance expands as well. And even if it was not their own deviances, it could also be expressed in watching as others around them would lower themselves for an opportunity, because they were people that could make things happen and get things done. So paying for access was not always with money, but sometimes with actions and activities. Pay to play does not always mean paying, in fact, with money. And because these people were the first generation of the club and they were low vibe, the actions and activities were always low vibe as well. And because they had money and power, and others did not, they knew that money was always the objective. Thus, they could ask others to do truly depraved things in their pursuit of it. It was entertainment to them. And depraved activities are usually associated with shame. And what one has done to get the job or the movie role or to make their legal problems go away. So since it was already something they would never want to speak of again because it was associated with shame, thus through the experience of the shame, that person's vibe was now lowered and they were now owned by it because it was usually done in front of others. And perhaps you can now understand how this became dicey in modern day times with the advent of cameras and video recorders and now cell phones. Because now that evidence of what the person had done would live on forever. So that person truly was owned by way of implied blackmail. They were owned by the evidence, the money or their shame, and the energy behind it. This, in fact, reinforces a caste system that was created by it. So this is the energetic DNA coded into movies, organizations, medical schools, and businesses that had all been founded at that time. Low vibe. This is also why many Capricornian or old-time systems and institutions are so deeply corrupt. And it is in part because they are all connected to John D. Rockefeller and his merry little band of friends. It was essentially a bunch of rich, bored assholes that started the club. But its reach and influence expanded with deviance and by entertaining themselves, by having others demean themselves, by engaging in and performing deviant shit, and then that person being owned by it. Now, doesn't that sound just like a P. Diddy freak off? It's just a different year, different people, and maybe it's just different deviances, but it's all the same idea. So the Diddy freak-offs represent on a micro level the inner working of the club itself. And if one wants to know the level one is at, one just needs to look at the actions of that one person in question and to see if they act in a deviant manner for others, or if they have others committing the deviant acts for them. So the club is an intricate, interconnected network run by the top 1% elite and those that they have corrupted and hired into prominent positions that they now own by way of either money, energy, or shame, by then performing deviant actions when placed in compromising situations and with evidence that stands as potential blackmail material. So this keeps people in line and it keeps them loyal. But what if somebody was already a deviant or a pervert or a PEDO? Well, in that case, all the more better. Because those were the people that had an easier time climbing the ranks or, in fact, even being promoted. Remember, these corporations were founded on low vibe energy. Therefore, other low vibe people are going to be rewarded. Thus, it is no coincidence that so many in the Nickelodeon Corporation were found to have Kitty, PORN, on their laptops and their personal home computers, because they were into it, and as such they were rewarded with positions working with and around kids. Yes, this is how dark and deviant and corrupt these people and organizations are. It is also not a coincidence that I use the word loosely, the journalist who debunked the pizza, and you know, in the pizza shop, there was a gate around the pizza shop. You know that story? The pizza shop with the gate around it. You're going to have to read between the lines. I have to be discerning with what I can say and not say. So the journalist who debunked that story was also found to have been a PEDO. Because they protect their own, and they also invest in protecting their own, because they also protect themselves and their own deviance with the appearance of debunking the deviance. Thus, the expression, those that scream the loudest have the most to hide, it's because in cases like this, they do. Just as those who have charities and organizations, and especially those that have in other countries like South Africa, have all had serious allegations of sexual impropriety and abuse, such as Oprah and Madonna and Steven Tyler and Prince Harry. I think thou does protest too much, says their guilty hearts. But here's a wild thing about Kitty, PORN. It is so multi-purpose because its presence is not only used to reward people that are already into it by having them climb the ranks faster. It can also be used if one is in fact not of the dark, but if you wanted to hold it over their head to ruin them. Because it was shown to me as apparently being ridiculously easy, if a computer is connected to a network, such as a work laptop, it is ridiculously easy if it's connected to a work network to put said Kitty, PORN, on their device. Then the unknowing person could be confronted with it and told, you now own them and they work for you. Because if they do not, the police will be involved and they will be destroyed. And it is not even something that they knew they had on their device in the first place. This is how there are so many people that are complicit in low vibe activities along the way up to the top of an organization. This is also going to explain why some CEOs or corporations are so corrupt. It is the corruption by affiliation. And even if it is not Kitty, PORN, it is the employees being complicit in the committing of a crime because of their employment and either directly seeing corrupt things happening or knowing about it and doing nothing. So for example, Harvey Weinstein was a big open secret in Hollywood, certainly among the elite, but it was not just an open secret between other actors and directors, but his secretaries as well. So were they not complicit by sending these actresses to meet Harvey Weinstein in a hotel room? So Miramax Studios, which is Harvey Weinstein's studio, was corrupt, but it was not the only one, because they in fact all are corrupt. They have all been infected, and the actors too, because the entry-level starting point in Hollywood and the music industry is worshiping Satan. So when Katy Perry said her career was not advancing fast enough, so she made a deal with the devil, and when Brad Pitt said he was a Satanist, and when Christian Bale thanked Satan when he won his Academy Award, they weren't joking. When Sam Smith performs and wears a hat with devil horns, it's because he's trying to tell us something. And even if somebody wins an award and they thank God, please understand, it is not our God they are thanking. Because for one to be a Satanist, they have to have stepped away from God, because Satan is now their God. So thanking God, in fact, means that they are thanking Satan. Now, why Satan, you may be wondering? Well, this is where there is an overlap between the club and the Cabal. As in, there's an intersection of the club and the Cabal as it relates specifically to Satan. Because while the Cabal has been around for thousands of years, the club has really only been around for just over 100 years. So, it is the Cabal and the 13 bloodline families that are the progeny of Satan. And because Satan is chained to one place, all of the efforts of the bloodline families is to sever us from our connection to God and to stick it to God by, among other things, creating artificial intelligence to be smarter than God's children and to corrupt God's children in any way that they can. So, in case you're wondering, do the Cabal and the club work together? Well, they work together in the way the United States Army and the Navy work together, which is not really, or not exactly, but that they are both divisions of the same government and have a shared goal. Except the Cabal and the club's shared goal is not protecting a country, but it is in keeping the vibration on Earth low. And they are not two equal divisions or branches of one government, because the club is absolutely below the Cabal, and they are only allowed to exist and only allowed to operate because they have that one same shared goal. Because the club is below the Cabal, and since we were just talking about branches of the government, I'll stay on that same thread to flesh it out with the following example. Look at Satan as the president of a country. The Cabal is the general of an army, and the club is lieutenant, and the celebrities are all the privates in the army, and we are all the citizens that are affected by the actions of those above us in the army when a war breaks out. Because the club is a faction of the Cabal, and it is only allowed to exist because they share a goal. And because the Cabal has existed for thousands of years longer, the club has evolved, or maybe in fact we could say devolved, depending on your point of view, over time. It started with the elite 1% owning everything and keeping the prominent roles in the family and demeaning those below them, with the implementation and proximity to the Cabal. So the cost of pay to play includes worshiping Satan. So it's kind of like when a big corporation buys a smaller one, and the smaller one can mostly still run themselves in the day-to-day operations, but perhaps with tech upgrades from the big corporation to help them run more efficiently. It's kind of the same way here, except that the tech upgrade is a fundamental belief change, i.e. worshiping Satan, to more thoroughly corrupt the souls of the useful idiots, as in the actors or the singers. Now, the actors and the singers do not necessarily know about the Cabal. They do not necessarily know about the 13 bloodline families and how those bloodline families are the progeny of Satan. They are just told that all 3D material success is due to Satan. And thus, to achieve it on their own, it is imperative that they too worship Satan. They are told Satan is real. And he is real. Some, in fact, may get to see Satan. They may get to visit him where he resides in Antarctica. And I have a fantastic members video on Satan, and there's a link down below if you would like to join my channel membership. So they might be taken to see that he is real. They're shown that he is real. He is real, and he rules the 3D material realm unlike God. Because, hey, look, just like you can touch money, they take some of these people to see Satan, and they're like, look, he's real. You can see Satan. Can you see God? No. Therefore, Satan rules the domicile of the 3D earthly domain. And what are some of the elements of the 3D earthly domain? Money. So they tell them, if one wishes to be successful in the 3D material realm where Satan resides, it is him that they must worship. Does it sound a little loco? Yeah. But it is being told to them by people who have what they want, as in success and money. And they are told that all successful actors who have money and who have won awards, success that they can only dream of having. Or if they're a musician instead, they see that the rappers with the bling and the sports cars, they're told that they all worship Satan and all of their success is because of it. They're inclined to believe it. And even if they don't believe it, they don't have to believe it to worship Satan. So they do. Now, worshiping Satan is for all the new entries into the club. But it is not for those that grew up in the club, because remember, the elite that founded all of these corporations and organizations, including Hollywood and the music industry, they demeaned those that came in below them. So it is akin to the way somebody who grows up in a country club and they're like old money, how they might look down upon a new member. Nouveau riche. They dress over the top and garish, and it's all brand labels. And they're uncouth, and they're too loud, and they're too gaudy. They wear hot pink fuchsia lipstick and not like beiges and nudes. And they are too over the top in letting people know that they have arrived and they are now part of the club. So this is why it is a really big deal when a new club member is placed in a relationship with a founding member's child or Hollywood royalty kid, such as was the case with Brad Pitt and Gwyneth Paltrow. This only happens when they want to send a message to everyone that this person is not only a friend of ours, but he is the golden one. So it's kind of like an industry-wide memo being sent out, but it's not like an actual like email or fax that they're receiving. Like Brad Pitt is hot shit, so you're gonna wanna cast him in movies? No. It's actually being sent out by him being placed in a relationship with Gwyneth Paltrow. And it is to send out a message to cast him in many films because his star is really rising. I have an entire standalone video on Gwyneth Paltrow where I even dive a little bit deeper into it. Link down below if you want to go back and watch it. But the caste system goes both ways, because if somebody acts out, irrespective of their status, and if they're higher up in the club than another person, they can be matched in a fomance with somebody below them to humble them and to get and to rein them in. And if that does not work, it is announced that they are engaged, even if there's never any intention of these two actors marrying. So the behind the veil explanation for why celebrities so easily get engaged and then break the engagement off, it's not their way of saying they're in fact going steady, because they're people just like us. They do not need grand gestures to proclaim that they're monogamous or this is their person, at least temporarily. It is in fact because the relationship is not real, but it is done to get a higher star to heal and to remember their place. This is also going to explain why actors and actresses do not really date outside of the industry. And it is not because people that are not in the industry just don't get their life or whatever bullshit they might say that it is, because it's not. But it is in fact because regular relationships do nothing for the puppet masters above the actors and the actresses. And if anything, dating outside of the industry would make an actor uncontrollable, because one of the ways they control them, especially if they're new, is through the fomances that they're placed in. So just like being a Satanist is entry level, so too the relationships that they are placed in is also entry level. And depending on who they are matched with, it can make a new up and comer appear to be either more or less desirable. Let's say, for example, this would be akin to like Brad Pitt, you know, he had married Jennifer Aniston, and a lot of people were like, but he's just way hotter than her. And then he was with Angelina Jolie. So they will mess around with couples in this exact same way because it's a way of either elevating their status or knocking them down a peg. It also sends a message about that particular actor or actress's status. And since these actors and actresses are all wounded souls, being told that them being matched with another person, even if they do not even like that person in real life, will make them more popular. They will go along with it. So from the very beginning, they are all locked into a system, and they can only marry who they want to later on in life. if even at all, which may explain why some actors do not have kids, or not until much later in life, a la a George Clooney. Because he was like, what, in his 50s when he married, I don't know her maiden name, but Amal, and then they had kids together? Here's your explanation why. Maybe their particular script, and not as in a script for a movie, does not include marriage, or their particular script can include being a reformed bad girl and to soften their image, as like what happened with Angelina Jolie. Because actors are not just cast into films, they are also cast to play characters in the industry itself. Bad girl, heartthrob, reformed bad girl, girl next door. So real marriages are very rare in Hollywood. And in fact, real anything is rare in the Hollywood industry. Because real marriages are routinely broken, and one such great example is Jessica Simpson and Nick Lachey. So real marriages are routinely broken, and real family members are replaced by fellow club members. This does not just happen in Scientology. When a family member that disapproves of their family being a Scientologist would be labeled a suppressive person. So it does not just happen in Scientology, but it happens in Hollywood because the actor's lifestyle now includes worshiping Satan, right? That's entry level. To get into the club in Hollywood and music, it's entry level. It's worshiping Satan. Can also include being inhabited by an entity while filming, joining a witch's coven, spell casting, participating in spirit cooking or blood, sex, magic rituals, and also being cloned. And just like all skilled abusers somehow know, isolation is key to controlling their victim. So too are actors and actresses all end up secluded and living in an echo chamber where everyone participates in the same activities, talks the same way, even if they don't in fact believe the things that they're saying. Otherwise they risk being blacklisted. And they all end up looking the same because of plastic surgery. Now, plastic surgery serves its own special and unique place in the club, and here's why. It sends a subtle message to the actor or actress, and it subliminally tells them that they are not in fact all that, despite them getting cast in movies or their $1 million paydays. So it keeps the actor or actress in line. And it is not coincidental that despite their natural good looks to begin with, casting agents, or even their own agent in fact, would be critical of their appearance. Because the entire industry is coded with demeaning a person. And the entire industry is coded with demeaning a person with acts and activities and demeaning their appearance as well. So it's kind of a way of keeping somebody in line and not getting them to think that they're too big for their britches. On top of being critical of their appearance to keep them in line, actors and actresses are owned in a very real way. For real. Because so much money is invested in them, from said plastic surgery to an entirely new wardrobe, to acting lessons, image consultants, hiring a team that comprises agents, managers, hair, makeup, stylists. Their investors expect to make back their money. So they are lined up with roles that will assure their investors making all of that money back. This is going to explain why some actors seem to constantly play the same role over and over and over again, and there's no diversification or expansion of them. This is because they scored the highest with test audiences in a certain genre, and despite their own wishes or desires to play serious roles or maybe different kinds of roles, they can't. Their masters will not let them because they do not want to lose money on their investment. So despite their looks, which are artificial, their relationships, which are fake, at least until they're older, their careers, which they have no say in, they are little more than puppets with somebody else pulling their strings. And even their paydays are not exclusively for them, but used for money laundering purposes for their agent. So if an agent happens to sign somebody big, they will be rewarded with a bigger payday. But how does it get to them? It actually comes through them by rewarding one of their other actors or actresses that get cast in a film. Because don't forget, the agent, the manager, they get a cut of what that actor or actress gets when they sign a movie role. So if their agent or manager signs somebody big, they are rewarded vis-a-vis one of their actors getting cast in a film, and then they are getting a cut of it. So this is going to explain why you can have like an actor getting, it's pretend, they're playing pretend, and they get paid $20 million per movie. Make it make sense. You can't. The only reason they are getting such a large payday is actually, in fact, because it's being diverted and directed towards like their agent or their manager or somebody on their upstream. So their salaries are not even an actual indication of their actual worth. Ouch. Imagine being Brad Pitt and being like, pouting. This is not all for me. Mm-hmm. So, in case you're wondering, how is Hollywood the same or different than the music industry? Here's how. Well, in the music industry, they too worship Satan. They too can be influenced by the perceived success of those that have come before them. However, the demeaning or diminishment of them is far, far different than it is with the actors and the actresses. Because the actors and actresses are meant to be glamorous and otherworldly. And if you want to learn more about that, you can see my members' exclusive video on the origins of Hollywood. But it is not for the music industry, which is based on songwriting, singing, and performing. So it is, in fact, a totally different talent and skill set, and one that those above them in the club have already lost by joining the club. Because again, when they join the club, they step away from God. Because in order to join the club, they must worship Satan. And by worshiping Satan, they have stepped away from God. So the further one is from God, the further they are from connecting to their own God-given gifts and abilities, and their connection to their ability to create and their creativity, and which is what we're all in fact here to do, create. So those that are higher up will sodomize the newbies to siphon off their gifts and abilities and their talent off of them. Because the new ones that are just joining the club, they're still closer to their connection to God. So they retain an element of it. Thus, they are sodomized, so the people that are higher up in the club from them can siphon that creativity and the connection to the divine off of them. And as one of my astute viewers mentioned, this is why fans lament about a performer or a musician and how their early days, their early work was so much better and more pure. And it's in fact because it was more divine. It was more connected to their God-given gifts and abilities and creativity. And it was before it was diluted by being siphoned off of them. Now you may be wondering, so why the hell would any musician agree to get into this? Is it because they don't know that this is done to them? Do they not know that they're going to be sodomized? That they're going to lose their connection to their own creativity? No. Because first of all, they want whoever it is that joins the club to read through the fine print really, really well before they agree to join. Because they want them to know exactly what it is that they are getting into, what it all entails beforehand. Because how can you so thoroughly corrupt someone than by telling them exactly what it is that is going to be done to them and getting them to agree to it? It's corrupt. It's perverted. Because surprise corruptions are not nearly as satisfactory as telling someone exactly what you will do to them in advance and getting them to agree to it anyway. Because that in fact causes real shame at that person's desperation that they would agree to it anyway. Telling them that or telling somebody that's a man, that not only will they be sodomized, but sometimes it can include more than one man at a time, and it can sometimes be done violently. And they agree. Why would they agree? Well, before clones, there was a whole dog and pony show of whining and dining them, setting them up in the best hotel, supplying them with the best drugs and the prettiest ladies or men to entertain them and to take care of their every need and their every fantasy. And it also helped that there was a period where the musicians were all showing off their homes and their cars on MTV Cribs. And the rappers were all out in the clubs and being photographed, and the photos were being shared in People and Us Weekly, and they were all iced out with the diamonds. And the ladies were all, walking around with the Hermes bags and the Louboutin shoes. It's all part of it. MTV is a Masonic network. So TV shows like MTV Cribs served a purpose. This is the purpose that they served. It was, as in with all of their programs, Cribs included, but especially Cribs in this case, it was to broadcast out to all of the wannabes that they could see the way that those that were already successful, how they lived, the goods, the 3D material goods that they could now afford, they would see it and they would think, it's worth it. Look what they could buy. Look how they live. Look at the houses they live in. Look at the cars that they drive. Look at how they're all iced out and how the ladies all have, designer clothing. Remember, it's a deeply wounded industry full of young people that are missing something inside of themselves, that they sought success and fame and money to fill what was missing. They're wounded. So they were susceptible to the 3D seduction. But since the advent of clones, it has made everything far, far easier. Because now the wannabes show up in a conference room to meet with a record executive, and in walks them. It's them, it looks just like them, but it isn't them because they're them. So imagine you go to a conference room and in walks you. They're just dressed differently, but it's you. They even sound like you. But it isn't them. Because how could it be them if they're sitting across from themselves? Like, it's me, but it's not me. How could that be? So they're told by the record executive, we don't even need you because we've already cloned you. So they have them. They're owned in that moment because they know if they want to live, they'll be smart and they'll just sign. It doesn't matter what it says. They're basically told they'll be unalive. Like, they don't even need to say that. They'll just be like, well, we don't actually even need you because here you are. It's implied. So if they're smart, they'll sign because they'll get to live. Nothing else needs to be said anymore. This is also going to explain why musicians, they are not quite so over the top with showing off their lifestyles any longer. Because they're not needed to seduce anybody. Like, why is MTV Cribs no longer on air? It served a purpose back then. They don't need it now because now they have the clones. They don't have to seduce anybody and they don't have to be like, well, look how fabulous their lives are. Who fucking cares how fabulous their life is? You walk into a conference room and you see yourself sitting there? Okay, I'll sign. I don't care. I get to live. They don't need to be seduced any longer. So this is why they are no longer showing off their lifestyles. They no longer have to seduce unless they themselves want to. But if they are choosing to, it is only to justify to themselves the price that they have paid and that it was worth it for them. Like, look at everything I have because I joined the club. Look at my Hermes bag and my Louis Vuitton suitcase and my Louboutins or my Lamborghini. Look at it, goddammit. Because if I can't show it off, was it worth it? Everything that I signed and everything that I gave up, was it worth it? If I can't show it off? Like, why did they sacrifice their bodies, their connection to God, if not for it vastly improving their life? But also, if their life was really vastly improved by it in the first place, why do they have to show it all off? It's because their life hasn't been vastly improved, except maybe for the zip code that they live in and the square foot of the home that they live in. That's it. So anyone wanting to join the club is told basic bitch level entry includes worshiping Satan and that he is the key to their success. But what they do not know when they join the club is that real success includes bigger and bigger and bigger asks, depending on how high up in the club they want to go, such as selling their soul and in perpetuity, which binds their soul to the earth plane in perpetuity. You can see my excellent video on Walt Disney linked down below to learn more about that. Or it includes spirit cooking or sacrificing a family member like Jennifer Hudson did right? It's not a coincidence that she lost her mother and her sister and her nephew all at the same time. So it can include literally sacrificing a family member or figuratively sacrificing a family member, which is why so many celebrities have trans kids, or their voice is taken away from them, like Ariel in The Little Mermaid, and they have to say things that is a pre-approved talking point memo about climate change or the trans agenda or LGBTQIA plus rights or whatever the new talking point memo will be tomorrow. Because if they do not, they will undergo MK Ultra mind control that assures that they will. Other asks to move up the levels in the club include being inhabited by entities like Beyonce. Because Beyonce is arguably the most famous female artist at this time. She is certainly the most decorated one with like 33 Grammys. Okay. You think that was all due to her talent? Who runs the world, girls? I'm sorry. My 9-year-old could have written a song better than that. 2% personal opinion. So imagine what she agreed to become so highly decorated with awards. And that she is so overrun by entities that she does not even enjoy the success that she has. It can also include being turned into a literal prostitute, like the girls in the band The Pussycat Dolls, or evoking Satan's energy into the world with blood, sex, magic rituals, or spellcasting in songs. And it is a steep price that they pay for their success, and in exchange, they are completely expendable. They are seen as a useful idiot, but they do not receive respect from those above them. And now, they don't receive respect from their fans either, as the idols are all being revealed as false. And it is not only the singers and the actors and actresses that are being used, as Hollywood as a whole and all of the studios have been used for decades, as the CIA has a branch in Hollywood, and all scripts must pass through them for approval before a movie is made. Outside of the CIA, movies as a whole have been used to satisfy the Cabal's law of karmic retribution. So this is again an overlay or an overlap where the Cabal and the club come together. Because they are used to satisfy the Cabal's law of karmic retribution, which states they can reveal to us whatever it is they have been doing or whatever it is they plan on doing to us, as long as it is revealed to us in a movie. However we receive it is on us. So they can reveal that we are all gifted, but if it is presented in a Marvel movie, we will not believe that it is real. Movies have also been used to reinforce negative beliefs about life as a whole and to create impossible love stories and standards that will make us all feel bad that our lives and our love lives don't resemble that. Movies also feature gratuitous guns and violence, death and sex. And it is all done to desensitize us to it. Now, movies, interestingly enough, was also shown to me, not just the actors, but movies themselves are used for money laundering purposes. Because producers will intentionally sign on and make bad movies that they know will underperform at the box office, so they can claim a loss when they file their taxes. So if, for example, somebody is making too much money in 1 year, they will intentionally invest in a movie that they know will be a flop so that they can claim it as a loss on their tax return. That is why there are so many bad movies that are made. Because again, they don't respect us. They don't even respect the actors and actresses that are in the movie. We're less than garbage to them. So we are the garbage disposal audience, because even bad films serve some other purpose that we as the audience do not see, such as lowering our energy, or they are used as glamour projects for a star to sign on for, where the movie's like all about them. Or it is designed to put two stars together as a cover story for how they met, and if they were in the club, how they first came to be matched together, such as the movie Green Lantern and Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively, two club members. So what was the cover story for how they came to have, met in the first place? It was the movie Green Lantern. It was a cover because they were two club children that were matched together. And if you want to know what the Cabal values, you see it in movies by way of the club, because it's the same shared value. So it's alcohol, sex, lawlessness, and a complete absence of God. It is a world with vapid but beautiful people, which they have with the actors and actresses who are all the progeny of the union between the club and the Cabal. And it is not just the actors and the actresses that are the progeny. It is not just the musicians that are used for their talent, because, like Hitler, they are obsessed with perfect physical specimens, which is where sports comes in to the club. Because they are obsessed with perfect physical specimens, the sports stars are used for that purpose. Because just like movies and music has been infiltrated by the club, so has sports. All sports. And if perfect specimens could not be found, well then they would just make them. Because remember, there was a cross-value infection where the Cabal joined in with the club. Even though the club is below the Cabal, they kind of like intersect. It's like two roads joining and becoming one road. And because the Cabal is obsessed with disproving God and playing God and unaliving God's children, all while enslaving those of us who in fact survive. So to that end, they will play with the biology of sports stars. Some receive enhancements, such as greater lung capacity. Some are human cyborg hybrids, like LeBron James. And some are just created. So the super tall basketball players, they were made by mixing different DNAs together to create a new race. Because once upon a time, giants procreated with human women. So you don't think they have that DNA? Because they sure as hell do. And if you are wondering if sports stars are in the club, or if it's just the club, the sports teams themselves, of course they are. However, the athletes are not treated nor seen as useful idiots the way the actors and the actresses are. And they are treated far better, except for the fact that the outcome of all games are predetermined. So it doesn't matter how good a player is, it doesn't matter how good a team is, they don't get to be the masters of their own destiny or of their own legacy or how they will be viewed or remembered by sports as a whole. And because the outcomes are all predetermined, it is done far in advance of the season even beginning. Because it was shown to me that the general manager receives a memo of a breakdown of the entire season before the season even begins, and it's outlining the team's wins and the team's losses. And prior to the season even beginning, it doesn't matter what sport it is, all sports, the general manager will receive a memo before the season even begins. They know which team is going to make it to the playoffs, and they know which team is going to win whatever the championship is. The winning team, by the way, in case you're wondering, what determines who the winning team is? They pay. But again, just like everything else, you pay to play, so it's not always money. Sometimes it's actions and activities. And if you have ever seen a game on TV where suddenly the refs start making weird calls or the players start making random errors, it is to assure the correct outcome. If you've been wondering why sports stars are paid so much money for playing sports for a living, they are paid so well as not to reveal the fact that all games in all sports are all fixed in advance. Because professional sports, after all, within itself serves many purposes, such as gambling, plus it captures our consciousness and it keeps us entertained and distracted. And many professional sports stars are cast into a particular role, just like the actors and the actresses are. So for example, Shaquille O'Neal was known to be the worst free throw shooter. Was he really? No. But that was the particular role that he was cast to play, and literally on TV. Because the sports games are televised on TV. So he's an actor too. He just doesn't professionally act in movies or TV shows, but he acts and he plays as if he is the worst free throw shooter. And Shaquille O'Neal has also shown off his Masonic rings on TV. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, right? Except it's not. Because just like there's an overlap and an overlay between the Cabal and the Club, there's an overlay and an overlap with Freemasons and the Club as well, and the Cabal as well. So here we could say it's not two roads that are becoming one, there's three roads that become one. Because there is more than one club playing out at a time. The Freemasons are one of them. And it is a club that includes many politicians, the Freemasons. It is no coincidence that 16 of the 47 United States presidents, including the very first one, George Washington, were Freemasons. It is also no coincidence that many were members of secret university societies like the Skull and the Crossbones. Because once one has shown their loyalty to one club and have shown that they can be trustworthy, they have the opportunity to join another, like Shaquille O'Neal being in the Club and also being a Freemason. And many celebrities are Freemasons as well. Not all of them, but it was specifically shown to me that it is the ones that have homes in other states around the country. So that way, with their membership to other Masonic lodges, their involvement excites the local Masonic community. So for example, take Jessica Biel and Justin Timberlake. They not only have homes in New York and California, but they also have in Tennessee, Montana, and Nashville. So imagine how the members in the Masonic Club in all of these locations where they have homes would be excited to know that Jessica Biel and Justin Timberlake are members of that Masonic Club, and knowing that if they go there, they might in fact see them. Now, not all celebrities or sports stars are Masonic members, but some are. And just like politicians are part of the Masonic Club, many of them, if not most of them, or certainly the ones that reach a certain level, are part of the Club. And they, like the Masons, are meant to pledge loyalty above all others, and especially in politics, because it is, again, I remind you, all one big club and we are not in it. So irrespective to what party a political candidate belongs to, they all fraternize with one another. The political faction of the club has one of the most elevated statuses. So look at it this way. If the singers and the actors are the lowest ring on the ladder, because they are seen as siphoning and extracting their energy off of them, or they are used as nothing more than useful idiots, the sports stars are somewhere in the middle of the rings on the ladder, but the politicians are closer to the top. That is why they are usually the best educated at the top tier universities, which again, I remind you, were designed to primarily serve the offspring of other elite family members. So where spots were reserved for them, and their aptitude, which is assessed early on, and how they themselves hold the most potential, maybe they're the most charismatic. It happens in politics. So many of them will be seen and be tapped to serve the biggest positions in the world. It's not just presidents here in the United States. It is every leader in every country around the world. So they are usually treated the best because of it. Now, alliances are made in the club, a la Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, because they were not a love match. Just like in the Hollywood club, actors and actresses will be put together, it is the same thing in the political faction of the club as well, where people will be put together to assure a certain kind of an alliance. So this was the case with Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton, and the elder Bush and Barbara Bush as well. Now, I'm not saying it's only them. I'm saying these specifically are the ones that I had looked into and that I have seen that about them. And irrespective of the gender of somebody's spouse, as in they both could secretly be men. Well, one is not secret. One is, the elder Bush was definitely a man, but secretly Barbara Bush was also a man. So irrespective of the gender of your spouse, if they are both men, or even if you are put together a la Bill and Hillary Clinton, where there might not be any genuine attraction between the two of them, it is frowned upon if one cheats on the other, because they look at it that if you can cheat on your spouse that you may not even like or be attracted to, that means that you can cheat on the other members of the club. And you are meant, if you are in it, to be loyal to your brothers above all others. Now, it was also shown to me that some politicians may pick their own spouse, but they are not picking from the general population. They are, in fact, picking from other members in the club. Sometimes they're put together like Bill and Hillary Clinton, and sometimes you can marry the person that you want to marry. But you're not picking from the general population. It's other club members that you have access to pick from. Because at that level, when one knows the stakes and shows an aptitude for perhaps being charismatic or being a great public speaker, their path is laid out for them. There are no outliers that can slip into politics. They are all part of the club, or they join when they get older, and if they are not yet part of the club, they will certainly be tapped and invited to join the club. Because again, there's no outliers. They're not taking chances. They're not going to allow anybody to slip in and go rogue. So they own both of the candidates outright. So this guarantees nobody can go rogue, and they all do exactly as they are told to do and do exactly what is expected of them. Now, if you yourself would like to learn more about this, I do have an excellent members video on 17, as well as regular channel videos that are linked down below on Donald Trump and JFK that will explain more about this. Now, as far as other organizations go, banking has always fallen under the auspices of the Cabal. And indeed, the I on the top of the pyramid of the United States currency is the all-seeing eye of Satan. It's in fact because the entire foundation of the banking system is corrupt and demonic. But in addition to that, agriculture, the healthcare system, because it's Rockefeller medicine, remember, oil and electricity and the suppression of free electricity, and newspapers and radio, TV news, and magazines like Time and Newsweek, but also the rag mags and even the influencers are all under the auspices of the club. Because, as I have pointed out, the Rockefeller Foundation is connected to laureates, as in Nobel Prize winners. So researchers of all kinds are also in the club. Some may even be in the club knowingly, and some are in the club unknowingly. So if, for example, a Harvard researcher wants to look into the efficacy of the Jabba-Doodles, or if there is a correlation between Jabba-Doodles and autism, they would have to submit their request to a board to receive funding for their research project. And if the board does not want that particular researcher to look into it, their request for funding would be denied. Now, why do you think there are no studies that directly prove a correlation and a link between autism and Jabba-Doodles? Is it because none exist? No, it's because funding has not been provided for it. So that would, for example, be, an example of somebody that is a researcher who has good intentions, but their desire to do more would not be allowed to come to pass because their request for funding would be denied. But if somebody was knowingly in the club, this is where there is a huge cross-pollination in the club and the Cabal as it correlates to the FDA. Food and drug are paired together. That is basically telling us that our food is drugs. And not all drugs heal people. Actually, in fact, none of them do. Now, in case you were also wondering, when I look into the FDA, because I am asked about them rather frequently, when I do look into the FDA, they are so interconnected with their correlation to the Cabal, I cannot see where one ends and the other one begins. So for all intents and purposes, let's just say that they are equal parts, Club and Cabal, because that's how interconnected they all are. As in, our food and drugs are controlled by the Cabal and the Club, right? They have a shared interest. And also, those that are employed with the FDA are completely owned and operated, because many former researchers that are knowingly in the club from Harvard played by the rules and knew to find favorable outcomes with their research papers. The food company that would fund their research papers would then recruit them, and that person that played by the rules and knew what kind of research was favorable to the FDA would get hired by the FDA with a cushy job after they had concluded their term as a researcher. How else do you think there are studies that tell us seed oils are healthy for us, but butter isn't? Or how red meat is not healthy for us, but processed food is? And who do you think made the food pyramid, which is completely backwards? The entire medical industry and big pharma is demonic, because again, it was founded by John D. Rockefeller, who was some sort of a demon fallen angel hybrid, energetically and on a soul level. There simply is no other way to put it. The entire food and medical system and big pharma is demonic. It is a black void, and apropos, just like with a black hole, when one gets into it, they are sucked into it and there is no way to get out of it. It is the same thing with both the medical professionals and the patients in the medical system that may end up in the medical system because of the food that they are eating. And that is certainly not any sort of a club that one should aspire to be part of, nor ever hope to find themselves in. And when it comes to science and religion, there are many who do not, in fact, follow the science that are in the club. And there are many in religion that do not worship God, but only simply worship the club's God, as in they worship Satan. Because the Cabal loves to corrupt and to pervert things. And is there, in fact, anything more corrupt and perverted than a pastor who does not worship God but worships Satan? They are making a mockery out of it, and they are making a mockery out of us. And while many branches of the government are staffed with good people or simply useful idiots, many, in fact, on top are in the club. So if a good person happens to find themselves with knowledge or information that does not reflect well on any faction of the club, such as the United States government, for example, Edward Snowden, then the US, by way of the Cabal, will try to destroy them or their life, but definitely their credibility. So what did the United States government do to Edward Snowden? He could go to nowhere other than Russia. Russia was the only place that wasn't going to extradite him, and it was the only place that he could actually hop a plane on without getting arrested. Now that was certainly convenient, because what did that do? That made him look like he was a Russian asset, because Russia was the only country that he could go to. Well, isn't that convenient? You can also just ask somebody by the name of Bob Lazar, who worked on UFOs, only to become a whistleblower about what he had seen, and to find his entire employment record for the government to be wiped, as if he never worked for them at all. Because that is the MO of the club. One is only as useful as they allow themselves to be used for. And if their usefulness runs out, or if the club chooses to make an example out of somebody, they will. And they will do it ruthlessly and without a second thought given. So phone calls and text messages will go unanswered once you have been cut out of the club. People you used to call friends will not answer your phone call, nor will they come to the door when you ring their doorbell, and they will cross the street when they see you. Because remember how everybody loved Harvey Weinstein until they didn't? How he was always thanked by every actor and actress in their award speech, and then nothing. No one came to his defense. No one famous attended his trials or submitted a letter on his behalf to the judge. It was like he never existed at all, because that's what they do. Once they cut you out, you are persona non grata. Because at the end of the day, no one in the club really cares about anyone else in the club at all, not even a little bit. They are all a collection of people kept together by the thinnest of threads, all looking out for themselves, lest they be the next one to be booted from the club with no warning in advance. Just ask John of God, because I did. He was a loyal foot soldier and servant for years. He thought himself to be untouchable until he wasn't. And he is in jail now. And there is a segment in a previous AMA about him linked down below. So even the loyalists of the members who dutifully followed the script that they were given, and who would never dream of coloring outside of the lines, they live in fear. And how low vibe is that? And why do they live in fear? Because even the loyalists of the foot soldiers can be booted out for no reason. And they do it to keep all of the members on edge and to encourage them to color within the lines. Because even if you're loyal and you could be kicked out, imagine if they dream of coloring outside of the lines. Well, then. And as the saying in Hollywood goes, you are only as good as your last film was. In the club, one is really only as good as their usefulness is. And sometimes their usefulness is to be the fall guy, like John Edwards. And if you don't know who John Edwards was, he was John Kerry's running mate as in the 2008 United States presidential election. So John Kerry was running to be the president, and he had tapped John Edwards to be his running mate to be the vice president. And even though John Edwards sacrificed his own son for his political career, he was having an affair which was exposed, and his career was over. Never you mind what he had done to join the club and what had been promised to him. So it's not like he was just some sloppy yokel who's like, I'm just going to have an affair and nothing's going to happen to me. No, he sacrificed his son, who was unalived in a car accident with a car full of other kids, for his political career. So it was not some stupidity or arrogance on his part that he thought the affair would not be exposed. He was like, I sacrificed my son. Nothing bad is going to happen to me. I'm a shoo-in. Except he wasn't. Because the affair was exposed. Because he was unknowingly cast in the role of the fall guy. He just didn't know that. So again, it's not just the actors and the actresses that are cast in movies and are also really cast to play a certain kind of a subset of a person on the world stage. It's not just the sports stars that are also cast to be the worst free throw shooter. It's the politicians that can be cast for particular roles as well. And one just doesn't know the role that they have been cast to play or for how long they will get to play it. Because one can be part of the club today and canceled tomorrow. Where do we think the concept of canceling somebody came from? The club, of course. Because this world is a reflection of the club and the Cabal. But though this world be in their reflection, and most on the world stage are actors cast to play roles, we are not. We are free, so we get to decide what we wish to give our attention to, what we agree to participate in, and what kind of world we want to live in. Because we, unlike the actors cast to play roles in the club, we at any point can decide we want to withdraw our attention from it and want to starve the matrix. So by sharing the information in this video, maybe you yourself have some ideas for how you can do that. Because you, after all, are not owned nor operated. So this concludes the hella long psychic energy read on the club. I remind you guys to please take what resonates. Leave the rest behind. And this is your reminder, as always, and until next time, to stay in the high vibration.